Well, Sabbath greetings to us, everyone, and thank you for joining us right here on Sabbath, May 10th, 2025. And we're studying The Dragon's Roar, number 319. The Catholic Moment for America has arrived. Our subtitle is The Catholic Moment for America. It is no secret that a new pope has arisen to the throne of the unholy see, and there has been much anticipation, expectation, and animation about this first of its kind American pope. The media are thrilled beyond degree, especially the left-leaning side, but even the Republican side, they are very thrilled with this Pope because he's most of them are Catholics. The Roman Catholics were very largely responsible for Trump's re-election, and he owes them a debt of gratitude. We'll see how he pays that. But the other secular media, or the Democratic media, they're especially thrilled because this Pope has been an antagonistic force against Donald Trump for many years, over a decade. And so they see him as a corrector against Trump. But somewhere in the middle, the Catholics are working on a scheme on how to corral and cajole and control the United States presidency. And this, indeed, above all times, is a Catholic moment in America, for what we will discuss today. I know around the Seventh-day Adventist world, this is going to be the dominant theme for today, and it should. But there's another important theme as well, and that is what's going on in the Middle East, because Donald Trump is in the Middle East right now. See, these two things are running in parallel, and people are not paying attention. So while, on the one hand, we know that there's a coming Sunday law, we know that, on the other hand, there is a Middle East war. And we're going to look in both of those thematics today. So let's drill down into a familiar passage of Scripture that we have been studying in Revelation 13. And we'll take one more gander there. From verse 11 it says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed." So it is important to see that the first beast with the wound on it is a papal power. That wounded head is a papal power. And the two-horned beast is going to mimic that system after the wound had been healed. So it demonstrates that it's after the papacy has regained its temporal and ecclesiastical authority that the United States, represented by the two-horned beast, will mimic or will implement its authority, exercise the full force and authority of Rome. As verse 12 says, he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. And the aspect of the first beast is where the deadly wound comes in. So, had it not been so important for the wound to be healed, then the United States could have made an image to the beast at any time in the past. But after October 31, 2017, we should look for the formation of strong alliance between the United States presidency and the Vatican. And we have seen that even under Joe Biden's presidency, he was the second Roman Catholic to enter that office. and the Supreme Court, a majority of which are Roman Catholics, conservatives. And we have the Congress, a majority of whom are Roman Catholics. So when you look on the platform, there was one person that was in their way all along. And what the Roman Catholics decided to do is that if we can't beat them, we join them, or we convert them. And in this case, they've been working masterfully at converting Donald Trump. And I've shared some of this information with you in the past. And especially leading up to his assassination, they really pumped the medicine in him. And we'll examine some of those. But we should note carefully that the two-horned beast is to speak as the dragon. So when the United States takes up papal mandates, it will be the voice of the dragon that we're hearing. Because the Roman papacy is represented by the dragon in Revelation 12. That red dragon represents Rome. Certainly it represents Satan, but it also secondarily represents Rome, Satan's viceroy on earth. So when the dragon makes war with the woman and the remnant of her seed who keep the commandments of God, he was angry with the woman, made war with her seed. We can see that this is the hand of Rome at work. So Revelation 12 verse 17 tells us the hand of Rome will be handily at work, seeking to subvert the governmental authority in the United States and around the world, to force people into Sunday sacredness. Now, why this is important at this time is because of the title that this new pope has assumed to himself, Leo the 14th. And to understand Leo the 14th requires an understanding of Leo the 13th. Just like to understand Francis, Pope Francis, who just died and just been funeralized, to understand where he was pointing to and where he's coming from, his theology, we needed to have understood the theology of his predecessor. Not Benedict the 16th, but Francis of Assisi. He was environmental. He was an environmental so-called patron saint. And so he took this title, Francis I. So to understand the theology of Francis I required an understanding of the theology of Francis of Assisi. This is how the popes operate. So if you heard of a John Paul, let's say John Paul III, you need to understand the motivations of John Paul II, because this means it's a continuation of his dynasty or his papacy. That's how the Church of Rome operates. And we'll say more about that later as well. But looking closely on what we have here, it tells us in verse 14 that this is a great deception. Certainly verse 13 shows that there be miracle-working wonders, fire coming down from heaven on the earth on the sight of men, and they deceive them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. Now we have demonstrated that the two-horned beast is not the false prophet. The two-horned beast is a separate entity from the false prophet. The Bible is clear in this. And we provide graphical aid, graphical assist to demonstrate that the two-horned beast in Revelation 19 verse 10, there's the biblical authority, and graphical illustration right here, let me zoom in on it, to show that accompanied with the two-horned beast is this false prophet power that will be working the miracle-working wonders, deceiving the world. So there is an ecclesiastical power, and we've seen that Donald Trump has opened an office, of an ecclesiastical office, an office on faith relations to the White House. And so that opens a door for an ecclesiastical authority to inform the president on matters of faith. And we should see this clearly, because this ecclesiastical office, while it is occupied now by an evangelical, can very easily be influenced and occupied by a papist. And evangelicals and papists are not far apart. In their morals and dogmas, they're not far apart. And so it only takes a level head or an unbalanced president to lean in one direction or another, and the whole system of religious liberty could be up for grabs. So Rome has been very calculating, and the Bible is very, very clear on this, that the two-horned beast is the one that is to make an image to the beast. Then we have Donald Trump horseplaying around with a meme that someone had created, calling himself as Pope. This is a very strong alliance, because you have an American, a first, as Pope, and whatever, immigration issues that this Pope may have with Trump can be transacted out, and they can make a deal. And those concerns can easily be laid aside. I personally don't believe that Donald Trump will change his posture on immigration and climate change. But another American president could easily pivot in that direction. But if Trump is at one, then so it be. But it shows a level of ignorance on his part. As no American president who knows church history and political history would romance with Rome. Trump says, he's a party of Abe Lincoln. Well, Abraham Lincoln was murdered by the people he's romancing with. And he ought to know that, or somebody needs to either inform him or remind him. And that brings me to this point. Abraham Lincoln's views about Rome, the Pope, the Vatican, the Jesuits, and their influence on American society. He had very strong beliefs and knowledge about the papacy. And to have an American Pope says a lot. This is historic on every dimension, because it is America that is to become the powerhouse, the engine behind the mark of the beast system. So the subtopic of this clip says, this news website says, Abraham Lincoln's views about Rome, the Pope, the Vatican, the Jesuits, and their influence on American society. Oh yeah, that was the same thing. On American society. So here it is, published June 2nd, 2024. And this was written by James Arndt, or the website is called James Japan, and the author here is James Arndt. Those who ignore the laws of mechanics, this is Abe Lincoln speaking. Those who ignore the laws of mechanics are apt to think that the large, strong, and noisy wheels they see are the motive power. They are mistaken. I deleted some of the prelude to this. He's speaking about the Civil War and the bloodletting that has gone on in America, in the South, and what has been the engine, the motive force that is fueling the Civil War. And he says, to the average beholder, they will think that this motive force is a steam engine. And it's not. It says, it is noiseless and well concealed in the dark behind its iron walls. No, I'm sorry, I missed something. Let's start over again. Those who ignore the laws of mechanics are apt to think that the large, strong, and noisy wheels they see are the motive power of the locomotive, says, but they are mistaken. The real motive power is not seen. It is noiseless and well concealed in the dark behind its iron walls. The common people see and hear the big noisy wheels of the Southern Confederacy cars. They call them Jeff Davis, Lee Toombs, Bugard Seams or Semis, etc. And they honestly think that they are the motive power, the first cause of our troubles. So he's using a syllogism here and using the illustration of the Southern Railroad, the Confederacy cars, and saying the force, the fuel that's driving those Confederacy cars, it's not the steam and the steam engine. It is coming from an unseen source. And he goes on. In red now, those words in red at the bottom. But this is a mistake. And they think that the troubles are coming from the Southern people, the leaders merely. This is a mistake. The true motive power is secreted behind the thick walls of the Vatican, the colleges and schools of the Jesuits, the convents of the nuns, and the confessional boxes of Rome. Did you know that slavery, and well, if you're attending these Bible classes, by now you should know that, because prophecy tells us that they would bear rule over mankind and cause people to rule over one another. This is the introduction of slavery in Daniel 11. We've seen that. And Abe Lincoln is telling us, those who wanted to perpetuate slavery in America, well, they can come courtesy of the Church of Rome. And just to appreciate this, and a lot of black people don't understand it, otherwise they'd not be so woke, but when the Church of England broke from Rome, the slave income used to go to Rome. But when King Henry and Catherine of Aragon had their separation, and that divorce was a divorce in the church as well, the Church of Rome, the Church of England became the new crown, where the slave economy, slave commerce would be deposited. So while the Europeans in general get a very bad name for slavery, those who understand the truth behind it would look closer and deeper, and they see that it's a Roman Catholic Church that introduced this slave trade upon the scourge upon humanity. Just to point that out. It goes on. There is a fact which is too much ignored by the American people. Lincoln is speaking. And with which I am acquainted only since I became president. It is that the leading families of the South have received their education in great part, if not in whole, from the Jesuits and the nuns. Hence, those degrading principles of slavery, pride, cruelty, which are as a second nature among so many of those people. Hence, the strange want of fair play, humanity, that impeccable hatred against the ideas of equality and liberty as we find them in the gospel of Christ. You do not ignore that the first settlers of Louisiana, Florida, New Mexico, Texas, South California and Missouri were Roman Catholics, and that their first teachers were Jesuits. It is true that these states have been conquered or bought by us since. But Rome had put the deadly virus of her anti-social and anti-Christian maxims into the veins of the people before they became American citizens. Unfortunately, the Jesuits and the nuns have in great part remained the teachers of those people since. I don't need to explain this, it's very clear. Those who manage the echelons of power, the Ivy League universities, they were teaching the presidents, the senators, the congressmen and women now, and mayors and all the other societal leaders. All the way up to the Supreme Court, they were preparing them for the Catholic moment in America. But in the days of Lincoln, Rome was not greatly liked, and a very strong and thick air of suspicion surrounded that religion. But they fought buoyantly and fiercely for their stake, and used their social gospel to blind the eyes of many. They offered education. They had hospitals and other humanitarian services that they provided that weakened the arm and the defense of their Protestant opponents. It goes on. They have continued in a silent but most efficacious way to spread their hatred against our institutions or laws or schools or rights and our liberties in such a way that this terrible conflict became unavoidable between the North and the South. As I told you before, it is to popery that we owe this terrible civil war. Let's think of that. They start wars very easily. And they set people against one another very easily. You see people go in these confessional boxes, they're confessing the greatest secrets. Greatest secret plots are hatched in these places. And this is an international body. They go in every country. They know the secrets of every country. And they know how to destabilize society. As they did. And create this rift, even today, between the races, especially the white and the black races. It goes on. I would have laughed at the man who would have told me that before I became the president, start again. I would have laughed at the man who would have told me that before I became the president. But Professor Morse, Morse is Samuel Morse. He's the man who invented the Morse code and telegraphy. Professor Morse, and they say in parentheses here, Samuel Morse, the man who invented the telegraph and who also warned extensively about Jesuit infiltration and its undermining American culture. Samuel Morse has opened my eyes on the subject. Well, a man who is involved with telegraphy, he understands messages. He was the Elon Musk of his day. He understood the communications that were going back and forth. He had a first-line knowledge. And so he was giving the president clarity. See, you need an Esther in the camp. And Samuel Morse was the Esther. Here, Lincoln is giving credit. Said it was Sammy Morse who opened my eyes to the evils of Jesuitism. Sometimes as Adventists, we flinch when we see some of our people in positions of political movements. And you have to wonder, why did they go there? Why did they accept this office? Well, leave it to the Lord. leave it to the Lord. He has his agents in strategic places so that information can be filtered back and forth. So it says, he opened my eyes on that subject. And now I see that mystery. And the writer says here, also known as Mr. Babylon. I understand that engineering of hell, which, though not seen or even suspected by the country, is putting in motion the large, heavy, and noisy wheels of the state cars of the Southern Confederacy. This is what he was saying. It's not the steam that is powering the cars that you see transporting the armies back and forth. There is an insidious hand in the sleeve, the hand of the Jesuits, the hand of the Roman Catholic Church. They went on, our people, should be are not, our people is not yet ready to learn and believe those things, and perhaps it is not the proper time to initiate them to those dark mysteries of hell. It would throw oil and fire, which is already sufficiently destructive. You're almost the only one, he's speaking to Chineke here, whose book I will share with you shortly. You're almost the only one with whom I speak freely on that subject. But sooner or later, the nation will know the real origin of those rivers of blood and tears, which are spreading desolation and death everywhere, meaning the Civil War. And then those who have caused those desolations and disasters will be called to give an account of them. The Civil War. This president who was assassinated credits the Civil War to the hand of the Roman element. I do not pretend to be a prophet, but though not a prophet, I see a very dark cloud on our horizon. And that dark cloud is coming from Rome. It is filled with tears of blood. It will rise and increase till its flanks will be torn by a flash of lightning, followed by a fearful peal of thunder. Then a cyclone, such as the world has never seen, will pass over this country, spreading ruin and desolation from north to south. He saw that through his imaginative eyes. He went on to say that, and it's good that he said that he's not a prophet, but he incorrectly said, and I took it out from the discourse, that popery would be defeated in this country and then peace and prosperity would thrive thereafter. He's right, but not in this country. It will be defeated in the Holy Land, and peace and prosperity will prevail there. So took that out for context sake. So here's an American president who understood, who had a confidant in the person of Samuel Morse, who was a communications expert, who developed the telegraph, which is the telephone service of our times, or the internet. This is how people transmitted messages back and forth. And he was able to give the president clear knowledge as to what's going on. We have the divine Morse code, and it is time for our voices to be heard. In the halls of Congress, in the Supreme Court, and in every other area, voices must be heard concerning the dark mysteries of hell that lurk within the bosom of the Roman papacy. And to celebrate, for a president to celebrate even jokingly, the recognition or the elevation of American to the office of Pope is just pure spiritual blindness and political blindness. And it could lead to disastrous consequences. So here in May 1st, Trump joked about being Pope. And he joked, but this is a type of joke that should never be made. We do not joke with the devil. So I want to just, you might have seen this, but for the sake of completeness, here he is.
As Pope, I'd like to be Pope. That would be my number one choice.
So we don't make those games. That would be his number one choice, to be Pope. But could this be a telegraphing? Could this be a telegraphing message? And the papists, as I've demonstrated before, they have been working overtime on Donald Trump. And they're seeing dividends. It's paying off. Let me give you another portion here. This is the Jesuit connection in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by Kenneth Polk, November of 1999. I took some great quotes that he had there on his website, and that's all I needed from him. His opinion, his theology, I didn't need. So what I'm sharing, and you could go to that website, you'll see only these quotations that were nicely placed, and I had to vet them too. So I give him credit for that. Thank you very much. He's alive. Here he's quoting from Claude Pratt in a book, Jesuitism Unveiled. Americans Warned About Jesuitism by Claude Pratt in 1851. We will never forget that our forefathers, the first inhabitants of the American land, were compelled to leave their native country to come to bury themselves in unknown and far distant wildernesses to escape the Jesuits' tyranny and cruelty. This is a solemn statement. And perhaps it's from this where the Seventh-day Adventist Church thought that the dragon's flood is a symbol of the church coming into the wilderness of the United States. Not sure, but thought I'd just point it out. But here's another one. M. Philip Miller, former president of the John Adams Union, he wrote to Jefferson in 1816. And in this letter he said, I am not happy about the rebirth of the Jesuits. Swarms of them will present themselves under more disguises ever taken by even a chief of the Bohemians, as printers, writers, publishers, school teachers, etc. You could see the direction they're going. They're taking leading roles in society. Printers, you're managing the publishing of media. That's all they had. That was the TV of that day. So they control the media. Writers, they control the narrative. Publishers, they control what goes in circulation. Schools, they control the narrative again, the education. In red now. If ever an association of people deserved eternal damnation on this earth and in hell, it is this society of Loyola. Not my words, but Philip Miller. And Jefferson responded in the below paragraph. Like you, I object to the Jesuits' reestablishment, which makes light give way to darkness. Remember what the Bible says in Revelation 12. The woman fled into the wilderness. And the dragon ran out there to engage her. The dragon, remember I told you, the dragon is Rome. Secondarily speaking, the dragon is Satan. But secondarily speaking, the dragon is Rome. And the dragon ran after the woman in the wilderness to accost her there and to really shake her down. And God will have to take her out of the wilderness and put her back in the vineyard. This is prophecy. The beast in Revelation 17, the scarlet beast, he was in the wilderness, the very place where the woman was found. And we see that even this Claude Pirat, he recognized that America is in the wilderness. It goes on. In the congressional record of April 25th, 1916, U.S. Senator Robert L. Owen was questioned by members of Congress as to what the meaning of this secret treaty truly was. It's a Treaty of Verona. The record shows his reply to include the following statements. This Holy Alliance, having put a Bourbon prince upon the throne of France by force, then used France to suppress the coalition of Spain immediately afterwards, and by this very treaty gave her a subsidy of 20 million francs annually to enable her to wage war upon the people of Spain and prevent their exercise of any measure of the right of self-government. Do you see how one nation is destabilized by another nation at the instigation of Rome? This is in the congressional record of 1916. They're showing this act of subterfuge and intrigue that Rome has employed to destabilize countries and set people against each other, like the Houthis and the Tutsis in Africa and in many other parts of the world. They set people on collision courses. You see how India and Pakistan, they're fighting over a little piece of land called Kashmir. And they divide the land in such a way that they will always have disagreements. I showed you the illustration of how the Palestinian state was divided, or the Palestinian territories, rather, divided in the Israeli state. It's divided to set people at war continually. So it goes on here. Next part says, the Holy Alliance, picking up here now, the Holy Alliance made its powers felt by the wholesale drastic suppression of the press in Europe, by universal censorship, by killing free speech and all ideas of popular rights, and by the complete suppression of popular government. The Holy Alliance, or the Holy League, the Holy Alliance, having destroyed popular government in Spain and in Italy, had well-laid plans also to destroy popular government in the American colonies, which had revolted from Spain and Portugal in Central and South America under the successful example of the United States. The Holy Alliance, coming out of Rome. Now there was a former Roman Catholic priest turned Baptist minister. Is it Baptist? Turned Charles Trinity. Don't remember if it's Baptist. Presbyterian. Turned Presbyterian minister. Wrote a book many years ago entitled 50 Years in the Church of Rome. And to the top of the book there, it's a little blurred, so I provided the context there, the text of what is there. In the presentation of this book, 50 Years in the Church of Rome, it's a former Roman Catholic priest. And in my notes I said Charles Trinity was the Roman Catholic priest who befriended Lincoln and warned him of the Jesuit plot to take his life. He was endeared to Abe Lincoln because of Abe's legal representation of him against some scandalous actions involving Trinity in Chicago. In time, Charles was expelled from the Catholic Church and later became a Presbyterian minister. They awarded him a posthumous doctoral of divinity degree some 6 years after his death. Former Catholic priest, earned Doctor of Divinity. He was a minister and a missionary, an evangelist among them. His book was a bestseller, much like Malachi Martin's book, The Keys of This Blood. But in recent decades, Chiniquy has been discredited as a conspiracy theorist. And if you go online, especially AI, there's a plenitude of information to discredit this man. But that's for the simple. It says here, conspiracy theorists. And I said, you understand how that works, conspiracy theorists. All truths that the establishment or the Holy League doesn't want you to know is called conspiracy theory. We understand that very well, having emerged on the other side of the poisonation campaign. His book, entitled 50 Years in the Church of Rome, is available online for a free download, and I'll share some pages from it today. Here to introduce his book, Charles Chiniquy said, after 20 years of constant and most difficult research, I come fearlessly today before the American people to say and prove that the President, Abraham Lincoln, was assassinated by the priests and the Jesuits of Rome. 50 years in the Church of Rome. Abe Lincoln was assassinated by the priests and the Jesuits of Rome. And he dives in. Because modern Protestants have not only forgotten what Rome was, what she is, and what she will be forever, which she will forever be, the most irreconcilable and powerful enemy of the gospel of Christ, but they consider her almost as a branch of the church whose cornerstone is Christ. These are Chiniquy's words. Sister White had almost similar words. She said, we should be irreconcilably divorced from Rome. But Protestants have forgotten the evil past of Rome, and they're cozying up to Rome. And they're the ones doing the moving, the advancing. And Rome is actually very thrilled at this. I'm so glad to meet you. He's speaking to Chiniquy. He confided these, as I said, he represented Chiniquy in legal matters, and so they became bosom buddies. And Chiniquy's files and records are prima facie evidence regarding the thoughts of Abraham Lincoln concerning the order of Ignatius of Loyola. And so when we find an American president romancing with that order, having himself had an assassination attempt on his life, and representing Abe Lincoln, one who had been assassinated by that institution, is to show a level of ignorance and naivety and spiritual blindness. He needs a Queen Esther in the room. So here he says, I'm so glad to meet you again. You see that your friends, the Jesuits, have not yet killed me. Lincoln is speaking. But they would have surely done it when I passed through their most devoted city, Baltimore, that's in Maryland, had I not defeated their plans by passing incognito a few hours before they expected me. So the plot was for someone to stab Abe Lincoln and murder him. But he received word of it and took a different train. And so the plot was foiled. And this is, he's speaking the facts here. These are facts of history. Cannot be denied. We have the proof, he said. We have the proof that the company which has been selected and organized to murder me was led by a rabid Roman Catholic called Bernie. It was almost entirely composed of Roman Catholics. More than that, there were 2 distinguished priests among them to lead and encourage them. There's a lot that can be hidden under that frock. I am sorry to have so little time to see you, but I will not let you go before telling you that a few days ago I saw Mr. Morse. Remember that Morse? Samuel Morse, the man who wrote the Morse code. I saw Mr. Morse and the learned inventor of electric telegraphy. He told me that when he was in Rome not long ago, he found out the proofs of a most formidable conspiracy against this country and all its institutions. It is evident that it is to the intrigues and emissaries of the Pope that we owe, in a great part, the horrible evil war which is threatening to cover the country with blood and ruins. That's the Civil War. And Samuel Morse discovered this information and made it known to the president. My dear President, I answered, I feel overwhelmed by your kindness. This is still from Chinika's book. Feel overwhelmed by your kindness. Surely nothing could be more pleasant to me than to grant our request. The honor you want to confer upon me is much above my merit, but my conscience tells me that I cannot give up the preaching of the gospel to my poor French-Canadian countrymen who are still in the errors of popery. Chinika is giving his testimony. For I'm about the only one who, by the providence of God, has any real influence over them. I'm surely the only one that the bishops and priests seem to fear in that work. The many attempts they have made to take away my life are proof of it. Besides that, I thought I'd consider the President of the United States much above the emperors of France, Russia, and Austria, much above the greatest kings of the world. Do you know why he mentioned these names? France, Russia, Austria. He didn't mention Great Britain, and they should have, because these were members of the Holy League, the Holy Alliance. Okay. Paragraph 2. The president became very solemn and replied, You're right. There's nothing so great under heaven as to be the ambassador of Christ. There's just so much content here, but I'm going to jump ahead and give you another slant, another slice. So here we come to this new Pope. Washington Post, May 8th, 2025. What does the papal name Leo mean? The history behind the new Pope's name. They actually are cued in on this, and they're going to guide our understanding to some important things. Here they said, by choosing the name Leo, the 267th Pope is joining a group of 13 other popes who took the name. Notice he's not joining a group of 266 other popes. He's joining a group of 13 other popes. They understand that it's a succession of the Leo dynasty that is going on here. The previous Leos were reformers, including Pope Leo XIII. Keep an eye on that man. Elected in 1878. His encyclical, Rerum Novarum, spoke of human dignity and the dignity of labor. Says Christopher Robinson. So his motive, his social doctrine was the dignity of labor and that people should be having fair pay for full day's work. And that was true. We need fair wages, and he pushed the unions, pushed in the formation of unions, the labor unions. But hidden in the sleeve of the labor unions were work hour requirements. And to a great extent, there were many beneficial things that came out. That workers should have breaks in between. You can't just work like a robot. There should be breaks, and human dignity should be brought to the factory floor. So those are good things. But there was that was a glazing. That was a glazing to cover the very insidious thing. He goes on, by picking the name Leo XIV, he shows he's committed to the social teaching of the church, which was made foundational by his predecessor, Leo XIII. I didn't say that. They're telling us how this thing works. He is committed to the life and ministry and teachings of Leo XIII. So to understand Leo XIV, you need to go to the brain of Leo XIII, said Thomas Reese. So I went to the Catholic Church themselves. Rerum Novarum, published on May 15th, 1891. Rights and Duties of Capital and Labor. And whenever you hear labor, you know there's always rest that comes with labor. It's a natural relationship. In paragraph 40 of that encyclical by Leo XIII, you see it on the screen there, the working man too has interests in which he should be protected by the state. And first of all, there are the interests of his soul. That's first of all. So he's leading to a point. 41. From this follows the obligation of the cessation from work and labor on Sundays and certain holy days. See how slick they moved it in? Just like they're doing in Europe, There's stress, and people are dying from stress and overwork, so they need rest to satisfy the human restlessness and to curtail the amounts of humans destroying themselves. Suicides. So this is the same argument. It's an old argument. The rest from labor is not to be understood as mere giving way to idleness. It's not just staying home and you go play cricket and basketball and soccer. The rest from labor is not to be understood as mere giving way to idleness. Much less must it be an occasion for spending money and for vicious indulgence, as many would have it to be. It's not for you to go shopping. No, that's what we're asking for. But it should be rest from labor, hallowed by religion, rest combined with religious observances, disposes man to forget for a while the business of his everyday life, to turn his thoughts to things heavenly and to the worship which he so strictly owes to the eternal Godhead. It is this, above all, which is the reason and motive of Sunday rest, a rest sanctioned by God's great law of the ancient covenant. Remember thou, keep holy the Sabbath day. This is Leo XIII. And this is the baton that's being carried by Leo XIV. We're not making this up. We know this for a fact. And even the eminent Washington Post said as much, as we just explained. But Leo continued to sum it up. So he's tying up all the loose points now. To sum it up, then, we may lay it down as a general and lasting law that working men's associations, these are the labor unions, working men's associations should be so organized and governed as to furnish the best and most suitable means of attaining what is aimed at, and that is to say, for helping each individual member to better his condition to the utmost in body, soul, and property. So that's a carrot. So let's go on now. Get the poison. Let the working man be urged and led to the worship of God, to the earnest practice of religion, and among other things, to the keeping holy of Sundays and holy days. Let him learn to reverence and love Holy Church, the common mother of us all, and hence to obey the precepts of the Church and to frequent the sacraments, since they are the means ordained by God for obtaining forgiveness of sin and for leading a holy life. You can't have a holy life without observing Sunday and the sacraments of the Church. And notice, it said something that is so interesting, because today in the Seventh-day Adventist churches is Mother's Day. Mother's Day. But they don't know that Mother's Day came from the recognition of the Mother Church. This is duplicitous reasoning. So they think they're celebrating mothers, and tomorrow is a really big day because the Sunday churches, they go all out. The Adventists have their Mother's Day today, and the others have their Mother's Day tomorrow. But it's all coming from Rome. This is to prop up Rome as the mother of us all. So, important to see that. Here is the American Jesuit Review concerning Pope Leo XIII. They asked, and on May 8th, the very day when Leo XIV was appointed, who was Pope Leo XIII? These are the Jesuits speaking on behalf of Jesuits. They have an important voice in this conversation. We should hear from them. Pope Leo XIII, who was Pope from 1878 to 1903, is known for publishing the encyclical Rerum Novarum on workers' rights. We just read it. Considered the foundational document for the Church's social teaching. You heard about the Church's social teaching ad nauseum over the past 13 years or so from Francis. And here it comes up. The document emphasized the dignity of workers and condemned the dangers of unchecked capitalism and socialism. This is the same thing we heard from Pope Francis. Tied to the new Pope's first words to the faithful, "May peace be with you all." His namesake, Pope Leo XIII, was also a peacemaker who reconciled the Church with the governments of France, Russia, Germany, and the Great Britain during his pontificate. See, he reconciled the Church with what? The governments, with the state. This is profound. He reconciled the Church with the state governments. And notice they included Great Britain there, because I told you they were part of the Holy League, or the Holy Alliance. This is important. Church and state. Remember, Trump has just opened an office to meld church and state. And while it is a listening office today, as we have said before, it can be and will be abused if continued on this path. The Jesuits continued. Pope Leo's name also has a Marian significance. It means related to Mary. Since Pope Leo XIII wrote 11 encyclicals on the Rosary and was also the first pope to embrace the concept of Mary as mediatrix, which holds that Mary helps distribute Christ's grace through her intercession. This is no small shaker here. Pope Leo XIII has been a central pillar in Catholic orthodoxy and Catholic missionary teaching, their social teaching, and to the inclusion of Mary as co-redemptrix or co-mediatrix as they said here. So they had her as a co-mediator. That means co-redeemer. She's co-equal with Christ in our salvation plan. The first pope who took the name Leo became pope in 440. Just think of those changing years. Known as Leo the Great, he promoted the doctrine of papal primacy based on succession from St. Peter, and was a peacemaker. And this is the very time when the Bible says, through peace, he should take the kingdom through peace, by subtlety, by subterfuge. Daniel chapter 8. We won't go there, but you remember that. He promoted the doctrine of papal primacy, the centrality of the Bishop of Rome, based on succession from St. Peter, and was a peacemaker who convinced Attalia and Hun to turn back from invading Italy. That was not biblical peace, but that was through psychology. It says Pope Leo X, Pope from 513 to 521. This is the time of the Protestant Reformation. Pope Leo X was the last pope to not have been a priest at the time of his election. So here you're seeing these popes these Leos are very central. And one of the things I didn't say about this pope here, remember, Pope, notice the period of time, 1878 to 1903. That was the most decisive time in the history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It was under Pope Leo that the 1888 message came and was rejected. It was also under Pope Leo that the Blair Amendment was taken into the United States Congress, and we had the first Sunday law that required A.T. Jones to go and petition on our religious liberties before the United States Congress. And Ellen White would say of that time, we came near having this realized in California a short time since, that this was only the threatening of the blowing of the four winds. As yet they are held in check. So CBS News of May 8th reports, who is the new Pope? American Cardinal Robert Prevost becomes Pope Leo XIV. After less than 24 hours of seclusion in the Vatican, cardinals ended the 2025 papal conclave with the election of a new pontiff. The man chosen, Cardinal Robert Prevost, will be known as Pope Leo XIV, the first pope ever from the United States. That's big. The new pope is registered to vote in the Chicago suburbs. Voting records obtained by CBS shows he's voted in several general elections and so he's an anti-Trumper. That's essentially what they're saying. So they're really saying, he's going to stick it to Trump. It goes, the now pope has shared posts about politics on his X account for years, in some cases reposting criticisms of Trump administration stance on immigration. Well, it's good if these two stay polarized. For the short term, it will work for our benefit. But you could see the tipping point. What if a J.D. Vance should take office and he and this man align? And they could accomplish a lot. Being an American pope. And a young fellow, he's really young, he's only 69. A lot of life in him. And if he does his exercises and eat well, he could be there for another 25 years as his predecessor, Pope Leo XIII. It goes on, another one says, Pope Leo XIV, honored by Trump. It is such an honor to realize that he's the first American pope, Trump wrote. President Trump celebrated the election of the first U.S.-born pope, calling it a great honor that Robert Francis Prevost, who chose Leo XIV as his papal name, was selected Thursday as the first pontiff to hail from the U.S. And Trump had some important things to say. Congratulations to Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, who was just named Pope. Mr. Trump said in a post on Truth Social, it is such an honor to realize that he is the first American Pope. What excitement, and what a great honor for our country. I look forward to meeting Pope Leo XIV. It will be a very meaningful moment. One of the things I didn't tell you about Pope Leo XIII is that he was the author of the now famous prayer called the Prayer of Saint Michael. Leo XIII, the predecessor. Trump is in the equation. You can see where I'm putting the dots together for you to see. Leo XIII was the author of the Prayer of Saint Michael. That's where the Trump connection comes in. And he's also a Marian. Marian, remember, he's the one who promoted Mary as redemptrix or co-redemptrix, or whatever terms they use. So both Mary and Saint Michael are very important to this Pope Leo. That is a direct bridge to the heart of Donald Trump. I can assure you of that. St. Benedict Center, the St. Michael Prayer. On their website, they wrote, Pope Leo XIII wrote the St. Michael Prayer in 1884. That's the year when the Great Controversy was published, after seeing a frightened vision. In the St. Michael Prayer, he throws down the gauntlet by enlisting the help of a very special archangel. This is a saint who became archangel because, when they go up to heaven, they become angels. Saint Michael the archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. Saint Michael makes a great general in this fight between Christ and Satan for our souls. Saint Michael has been assigned to fight against Satan, to protect faithful souls from him, especially at their death, to champion God's people, and further along this line, to escort them to their judgment. Saint Michael is the escorter. He transports saints to judgment before God. So you got to be on good graces with Saint Michael. The Catholic Reporter, National Catholic Reporter, of October 1st, 2024, has this. Reporters inbox says, why is Trump tweeting about the Virgin Mary and Saint Michael? Very important question. And the Catholics are fawning over it. Former President Donald Trump is infamous for his enthusiastic use of Twitter, now X, share Catholic saint imagery. Sharing an image of Saint Michael on his feast day, September 29th, Trump tweeted the words of the Saint Michael prayer without further context or elaboration. And here he tweets the Saint Michael prayer. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God cast into hell Satan. So it's a prayer to Saint Michael. A prayer to a saint. They don't believe Saint Michael is Christ. Saint Michael is a human being who became a saint and is now an archangel in heaven. These are two different entities. Don't confuse them. And so they believe that you can pray to a redeemed human being. This is blasphemy. Donald Trump sent that prayer without any further context, they said. But I will show you the context. Saint Michael is regarded, the Catholics continue, Saint Michael is regarded as a defender of the Catholic Church, and is often depicted as a spiritual warrior and a leader in the fight between good and evil. Before the 1962 to 65 Second Vatican Council, the St. Michael prayer was a fixture at the conclusion of every Mass since its composition by, drumroll please, Pope Leo XIII in the late 1800s, 1884 to be exact. Beginning in 2018, the prayer has returned to use in some dioceses in the United States after gaining renewed interest in the wake of the sexual abuse crisis. In evoking the prayer, which features language referencing spiritual warfare in battle, one could argue that Trump, here's the key, Trump, the Republican presidential candidate, is attempting to ingratiate himself with Catholics who believes they are under attack from secular society. But they went even deeper than that. So it's not just befriending Catholics. Certainly it's a political move, we have to admit. Politicians do many things to gain the favor, to win at the ballot box. But there's more substance than meets the eye. This isn't the first time that Trump has tweeted an out-of-context Catholic image, though. See, out of context, it seems weird that on the feast day of St. Michael, feast day of St. Michael, then Trump tweets out something on behalf of St. Michael, so-called saint. On September 8th, the day Catholics celebrate the Nativity of Mary, remember that Leo the 13th is prominent for two things. Apart from the Sunday movement, Sunday law, which he really strongly believes in the social teaching, the other two theological tenets that he masterminded was Mary and St. Michael. St. Michael's prayer. So on September 8th, the day Catholics celebrate the Nativity of Mary, Trump tweeted an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is the same Mary, saying, "Happy birthday, Mary," September 8th. And then hear what the Catholics say. Here's the image that he tweeted. Hear what the Catholics said. It's worth noting that Trump used an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, an image of Mary from her appearance in Mexico in 1531, and not an image of Mary of Nazareth. This nuance seemed lost to both the former president and the majority of those who commented on the post. It's not lost to us. You know why? And I was miffed at this when they said this nuance seems lost. It's not that 1531 is an important year to Protestants. It's deeper than that. Lady Guadalupe is the lady whose shrine Donald Trump's face was directed towards when the bullet grazed his ear in Butler, Pennsylvania, on Sabbath, the 13th of July, 2024. And he had obtained a statue with the prayer of so-called St. Michael from March of that year, March of last year, when they had the feast of St. Joseph at Mar-a-Lago. Then here's a profound statement that they made. To date, Trump has not posted a reference or observance of any other religion of faith denomination, fueling rumors on social media that the former president might be interested in converting. You see? Bring him in. We're reeling in the marlin. Fueling rumors that the former president might be interested in converting, though there is no indication of that. That's such a slick way of handling things. They know what they're doing. They're making an all-out effort to conquer Donald Trump in their orbit. And here is evidence.
What is this about President Trump and a statue that you gave him?
Yeah. I don't think I've publicly mentioned this before. I mean, I've told a few people it was nothing less than miraculous. I knew I was going down. They had a big Catholics for Trump prayer thing. You were there. Wasn't that glorious, right? Yeah. And so there's like 1,000 people in this big ballroom at Mar-a-Lago. I knew I was flying down on Monday because it was Tuesday the 19th, the Feast of St. Joseph. I mean, it was such a perfect timing. And so late Saturday, Oscar Delgado, and he hands me this box in it, and he says it's a statue of St. Michael that he got at the cave of St. Michael in Italy. He says, you have to give this to President Trump. Well, okay, you can't get within 10 feet of President Trump. And if you get 9.5 feet, there's going to be 3 guys that are going to take it down. And I'd been to Mar-a-Lago at this point, I think this would be my 5th time there. 6th time, I think, was April. So I take it down, and I'm going to this big thing, right? There's like 1,000 people there. And so I spotted a security guard, their young security guard, and I said, can you at least like point me in the direction? He says, come with me, I'll take you down the shortcut. And we walked by, and it was very close to the front door of where the president is. And we just kept walking, because you don't meander there. And finally got to a point where I knew where I was, and so I was carrying the box, and I said, okay, I can take it from here. And in that entire time that I had been there, I've never seen a single person on the grass. Right? I'd be afraid to step off that sidewalk, because if you get into where are they hiding? Right, the Secret Service.
Yeah.
So I happened to see over to my left 2 young men, and I thought, what are they doing over there on the grass? I just kept walking, and all of a sudden I hear, Father Altman. And I look over, and there's Bo. Now, nobody knows who Bo is, but Bo was at my table. I'd met him before. I'm really bad with names and faces, but I recognized him. And so I walked over because you can't be rude and just... So I walked over, and right now it's about 11:15, quarter to midnight.
Oh, quarter to midnight.
It was it was late. I mean, when I left that venue, I was literally the last person out. And he said, this is my friend, Barron.
Oh.
Right, so my only image of Barron is at the inauguration, and he's like, I think 11, and just a little boy. He's now, I think, 6, 7. So like, you look up like this. So when Bo says,
you're looking up.
Yeah, so when Bo says, this is my friend, Barron,
Yeah.
I immediately say, it felt like an idiot, the Baron? Like, I mean, how many Barons do you know? I only know one. Yes, the Baron. And I looked up, and sure enough, and I was able then to give him that statue, and he gave it to his dad.
Oh, wow.
How blessed I was in God's providence to run into the one person that I could give that to that would give it to him, and he did. And so then I hear back that was on his desk and perhaps on his bedstand now. That St. Michael statue from the cave in Italy that got into his hands.
Now, that is so profound, because this idol came from Italy, and it was perhaps exorcised and transmitted by emissaries of Rome to Trump, where it sits on his nightstand, according to this representation here. So that's interesting that they have been, and that's from March of last year. And this prayer of St. Michael is supposed to be some powerful prayer that fights against evil. So when Trump survived the assassin's bullet on July 13th, you can imagine how much of a tug this puts upon him to think that it's St. Mary and St. Michael that are his protectors. Of course, he has publicly stated that it was God Almighty. He never flinched in that direction, and I hope he continues in that path. But what I'm suggesting is that the pressure to squeeze him into a Catholic mold is inexorable. On September 30th of last year, 24, the Tribune Express, or Express Tribune, reports Trump's prayer to St. Michael sparks speculation about Catholicism conversion. Subheading, Donald Trump's prayer to St. Michael on Michaelmas, like Christ Mass, on Michaelmas, raises speculation about a potential conversion to Catholicism. They are pressing the battle to the gates. Former President Donald Trump recently shared a prayer of St. Michael, the Archangel on X, formerly Twitter, in light of the upcoming 2024 elections, adding a spiritual element to the heated political atmosphere. His message was posted in Michael Mass, celebrated annually on September 29th, a Christian, really Catholic feast day honoring St. Michael and all angels. Trump's prayer also sparked speculation of a potential conversion to Catholicism, further fueling intrigue about his religious beliefs. So, at some point, Ed, you know that these conversations are being held on the back channels as to his total unfettered commitment to the Church of Rome. Here, the Canadian Free Press writes, the most Catholic moment in American history. This is July 4th of 2024. This is before all of these, I'm showing you. This here is before the assassin's bullet. The most Catholic moment in American history. Hail Mary prayer sung for the White House. Donald Trump keeps a statue of St. Michael on his desk. On June 29th, Father Altman, the man that we saw in the black robe in the video, Father Altman reported that he was able to personally give Baron Trump a statue of St. Michael and the Archangel that was obtained from the famous cave of St. Michael in Gorgano, Italy. Baron assured Father Altman that he would give the statue to his father, Donald Trump, and after which he heard back that Trump had received the statue and that it was on his desk. This is something of a miracle that is highly blessed, that a highly blessed statue of St. Michael, the Archangel, should travel across the seas and wind up in the hands of President Donald Trump. This indeed is providential, seeing that St. Michael is a patron saint of police and military personnel, and that Trump is a prospective commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. Heaven is out to protect him in the militant march ahead to reclaim America. So you could see, and you heard of Michael Flynn and so many others. These are strong Roman Catholics who have been powering behind Donald Trump to get him back into the White House. Goes on, this speaks of Father Altman in that it shows how God used him to reach the president with this protection from on high through St. Michael and St. Mary, Lady Guadalupe. The aura of sanctity indeed rests upon this holy shrine, St. Michael, so it is of no small significance that President Trump should have some connection with it. It calls to mind the Holy Hermit, and here's a prophecy of sorts from the 1980s. It calls to mind the Holy Hermit and mystic Tom Zimmer, known as the Hermit of Loreto, who in the 1980s told his doctor friend Claudia Curan that he had received a premonition from God that a certain man would lead America back to God. And that man would be none other than Donald J. Trump. A certain man would lead America back to God. This is from 1980s, 1983 to be exact. And that man would be none other than Donald Trump. This plot has been laid a long time ago. Zimmer was so convinced that Donald Trump would become a great spiritual leader of America that he wrote his name on a brick and had it placed in the reconstruction of St. Peter's Holy Door after the extraordinary jubilee that year in 1983, in order that Trump might receive blessings from the many masses said at St. Peter's Basilica. Do you think they're working hard on Donald Trump? They have been for a long while. It was at the Shrine of Loreto where the hermit Tom Zimmer spent his last years in prayer, believing that Trump would bring about a Christian revival of America. This is July 4th of 2024 when this was published, but it was known from back in 1983. Zimmer's residence in Loreto ties not only with Trump receiving the statue from St. Michael Cave, but with its having a Maronite, that's Mary, a Maronite priest, Father Andrew Mahana, exorcised the White House before moving in after his inauguration. So they went and they did their incantations at the White House before Donald Trump went in office the first time. And you can be assured they did it again this time. Father Mana presented Trump with a statue of Our Lady of Fatima and a rosary, and the president asked if he could keep both with him at the White House. We don't see those on the television pictures and such, but these effigies were placed there from 2017, and perhaps they're still there with the statue of St. Michael, among other things. Of course, Trump's wife is also Roman Catholic. This is not to mention that at the close of the 2020 Republican National Convention, opera singer Christopher Macchio sang Ave Maria, and they did that again this time, from the White House balcony. One commentator called it the most Catholic moment in American history. It was done again on Inauguration Day. The Hail Mary prayer is sung from the White House. This is a Hail Mary move. Ave Maria, hail to Mary, mother of common God. Here's you Catholic. Did you know Our Lady of Fatima is represented at the White House? This is June 7th of 2019. And here's on Inauguration Night, Father Andrew Mana exorcised the White House and presented a statue of Lady Fatima kept there today. And paragraph 2 is important because you could see what the mission he's on right now, and how these alliances are made. Father Mana was invited by President Trump's inaugural committee to his inauguration to discuss with him not prayer, but to discuss with him shaping Middle East policy to benefit persecuted Christians. You see how church policy gets interwoven with national objectives. This man came there not for prayer, but to get a political favor on behalf of his church, a deal made. During his January 20th, 2017 meeting with President Trump, Father Mana presented him a statue for Lady Fatima and a rosary. And then on July 18th of 24, did Our Lady of Fatima and St. Michael the Archangel protect Trump from assassination? That's a big question. Greatest warrior, this is the Last Day News, a Catholic source, you see there, Monstrous or whatever it's called. Greatest Catholic warrior, Michael, is the greatest warrior of heaven. Call upon him often, my children. Supposedly Jesus said that on June 19th of 1979, June 9th of 1979. Veronica, Our Lady says there will be an assassination of a very prominent figure, Our Lady. The assassination will set your country in great jeopardy, my child. It's from Our Lady of the Roses, November 22nd, 1975. And they're showing the intervention of these Marian and St. Michael characters. There's more besides, and I think that gives you a good context for what is happening. Now, when Donald Trump, in that picture, when the assassin's bullet grazed him, there was a Roman Catholic priest who was called upon to pray for the opening of that rally. And that priest did not stay for the rally. He just came to do the prayer. And so the headline says, Catholic priest Father Sharon predicted Trump's shooting after praying at campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. That's on July 13th of last year. So here this man, this priest, in his own words.
I told him, whatever my thoughts are, it doesn't really matter. What's important is that, we pray for our leaders. We used to have monasteries, people. We used to have consecrated religious in the tens of thousands praying against the unseen principalities which are waging war in our visible world. But without them now, without these monasteries and these convents in their tens of thousands, it falls down to the level of the common man and woman in the domestic church to pray for our leaders. So I told the people is to pray for him, for his protection. And the reason I said that is because people are going to try and kill him. They're going to try and shoot him. And I left it at that, and I left and went to my car. And as I was going to my car, I began to hear, I heard something, and then I saw a bunch of people running, and I didn't think anything of it. And then I started to hear that someone said there were gunshots. So at that point, there was just mass chaos on top of chaos, mixed together with chaos. And that's how the devil works. He loves chaos.
This is the priest who prayed for the rally and walked as he was going out saying, pray for Trump. They're going to try to shoot him. They're going to try to kill him. People are trying to kill him. Pray for the president. And that moments later, gunshots rang out and he was shot. And so you could see how the devil stitches all of these things together to put a web. So Trump is webbed around by the Roman Catholic Church at this point. Look at this. This is the Daily Caller of March 22nd, 2024. Only Catholic option. Trump is the only Catholic option, in other words. Faith leaders descend on Mar-a-Lago to rally support, pray for Trump as campaign heats up. And here the report says, Mar-a-Lago, the Florida residence of former President Donald Trump, opened its tightly secured gates Tuesday evening to welcome hundreds attending Catholic prayer for Trump. The gala served as a gathering for Catholic leaders to pray for the presumptive Republican presidential nominee as he continues to get attacked from all sides, according to the website For Catholics for Catholics. The event took place on March 19th. Remember, that was the date when Father Altman went, or Mr. Altman went and delivered the statue of St. Michael to Barron, who subsequently gave it to his father. The event took place on March 19th, a day Catholics celebrate the solemnity of St. Joseph. The last three elections have been decided by the Catholic vote. So don't think that Donald Trump is the only president who has been put in office by Roman Catholics. But Rome is calculating, and she's advancing her stake in the game. She's getting confident in her prowess, too. The last three elections have been decided by the Catholic vote. Catholics for Catholics founder and CEO John Yep told the Daily Caller, there is no path to the White House for President Trump unless he wins this key voter bloc. He wanted to assemble Catholic leaders from around the nation, bringing them together to pray for the president. In addition, he wanted to make a strong and definitive statement that President Trump is the only Catholic option for 2024. The only Catholic option. So I spent the last hour and more talking about the Catholic moment in America. I want to direct our attention now to the other area, the other aspect of prophecy. And that's the aspect regarding the Middle East crisis. In this part, Seventh-day Adventists will not be talking about today. But they should be, and they can't because they have rejected light. And I'm going to turn our attention to Zephaniah chapter 2, where we'll look on this familiar passage to us by now, who are studying present truth, for the information that follows. So, it tells us here, first 4 verses, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired, before the decree bring forth, before the day passes the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you. Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. For Gaza shall be forsaken, and Ashkelon a desolation. They shall drive out Ashdod at noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. So here we are seeing a prophetic pronouncement that a people known, they're undesired. It's a people without a homeland should gather themselves together. Somehow a certain consciousness, a certain awakening will come in their minds that we need to gather together. And this consciousness, this awakening call in their heads must occur before the decree brings forth and before the day passes as a chaff. That's the day passes of the chaff when the stone of Daniel 2 smites the image and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carries them away. So this is before the separation, the judgment for the living in the house of God, before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And that's why it says, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you. Before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you. So there's to be a decree that brings forth, and all of this has happened before the decree and before the day of the Lord's wrath. Fierce wrath. This decree, there's a decree that is to bring forth. A death decree and the mark of the beast decree. That has a death decree with it. And the day that passes is a chaff, when the stone smites the image. And God's people are to seek his face today. The righteous are to seek righteousness, that they may be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. When the stone is cut out, they would be hid, protected. They would be God's prized jewel. They'd be a part of that stone if they're alive. And then it goes on to tell us that Gaza, before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes upon you, Gaza shall be forsaken. That means its inhabitants will be uprooted. Gaza shall be forsaken. Ashkelon a desolation. They shall drive out Ashdod at noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted out. They shall drive out. These are enemy forces. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast, the nation of the Kerethites. The word of Yahweh is against you, O Canaan, the land of the Philistines. I will even destroy thee, that there shall be no inhabitant. This place will be depopulated. Let me pause there. And let's get the headline news for May 6, 2025. Gaza should be completely destroyed and its people moved to third countries, said Israeli minister. Gaza will soon be completely destroyed and emptied of the millions of Palestinians still living there, a far-right Israeli minister has vowed, a day after Israel's cabinet approved a plan to capture the enclave and occupy it indefinitely. Israeli Security Minister Bazel Somterich, speaking at the settlements conference in the illegal West Bank settlement of Ofra, said Israel is within months of declaring victory in the Strip, which is suffering from a 2-month blockade of aid. It's a political statement. Gaza will be totally destroyed. This is the Minister of Defense saying this. This is Israeli Security Minister Bazel Somterich. Gaza will be totally destroyed, he said. In another 6 months, Hamas won't exist as a functioning entity. He added that the population of Gaza will be sent to a small humanitarian zone in the south, from where they will be forced to look at relocating to third countries. They will be totally despairing, understanding that there is no hope and nothing to look for in Gaza, and will be looking for relocation to begin a new life in other places, he said. This is what the Bible said over 2,500 years ago. And it's now headline news on the Independent and on CNN. Israel vows to escalate war with new plan to conquer Gaza. Here it reads, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said the population of Gaza will be displaced to the south after his security cabinet approves an expanded military operation in the enclave that a minister described as a plan to conquer the territory. The vote on Sunday came hours after the military said it would mobilize tens of thousands of reservists, strengthening its capacity to operate in the besieged Palestinian territory. One thing will be clear, there will be no in and out, Netanyahu said in Monday's video message. We'll call up reservists to come and hold territory. We're not going to enter and then exit the area only to carry out raids afterward. That's not the plan. The intention is the opposite. We're going to conquer, in other words. There will be a movement of the population to protect them. Here, that's a nice way to be politically correct. There will be a movement of the population. Thank you very much. That's what the prophet tells us. Netanyahu said of the intensified operation. A senior Israeli security official earlier said the operation in Gaza, called Gideon's Chariots, was unanimously approved by the security cabinet with the aim of subduing Hamas and securing the release of all hostages. The plan would be implemented after U.S. President Donald Trump's visit. He's in the Middle East right now today. After U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East next week, that's now this week, to provide a window of opportunity for a hostage deal, the official added. If no hostage deal is reached, and that's a thin hope, if no hostage deal is reached, Operation Gideon's Chariots, what do you do with chariots? You put people in them and carry them off, cartwheel them off, like they did with the people of the Northern Army and the South. They put them in chariots and cartwheel them off, the Assyrians and the Babylonians. Operation Gideon's Chariot will begin with full force and will not stop until all its objectives are achieved. The plan then is to displace Gaza's entire population to the south of the enclave, following which the total blockade of humanitarian aid may be lifted, the official said, adding that the military will remain in the area it captures. In any temporary or permanent agreement, Israel will not evacuate the security buffer zone around Gaza, which is intended to protect Israeli communities and prevent arms smuggling to Hamas, the official said. We are on the eve of a major entry into Gaza based on the recommendation of the General Staff, Netanyahu said in his video message, adding that military officials told him it was time to start the final moves. My brethren, for all that we've looked on the papacy, and now we're looking in the Middle East. And we have to wonder what's next. Because these are the headlines of Bible prophecy. It becomes necessary for God's children to fix their minds on that other time. Remember, we have seen this playbook over and over again. Every week we come to the same point. And I shared with you before the Jerusalem Embassy Act. This is Daniel 11:45. Part A was fulfilled when Trump was in his first term presidency. And Part B is waiting to be fulfilled. It could very well begin its fulfillment under his second term presidency. And so I turn now, as we wind down, to Daniel 12, verse 1 to 3. And somehow I missed Daniel 11, which says that the king of the north shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. And this is where the Jerusalem question comes in. And those who do not see this are deservedly blind. Here it says, the king of the north shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. That's Mount Jerusalem. Yet he shall come to his end. The king of the north. The United States should come to a military end. We've been pumping a lot of military over there, and military hardware and technology. We have Iran to deal with, their whole nuclear disarmament that we are saying we're not going to wait too long before we pull the trigger to dismantle that system. The Middle East is supposed to be a tinderbox for a big burnout, and we're seeing the stages of it set. Even while we see the stages for the image-based system being set in place, we see also the stages for the war being set in place. And these two things are running in parallel. One will eke out the other just by a short space. And this is where Daniel 12 brings us to. It says, "And at that time, when the king of the north is descending, shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time." So from the time of the king of the north, sometime between the planting of his tabernacles and his coming to his end, there should be a time of trouble, to the time when Michael stands up. Such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. God is showing us here how the final gospel work will be wrapped up on this planet Earth. He's depending on his church, his 144,000 evangelists, to take to the field. They will proclaim the last gospel herald. They're the ones who will survive and be found written in Michael's book of life, as it says here, shall be found written in the book of life. And those are the living, written among the living, they're in the book of life. The dead will be resurrected. In verse 2 it tells us that. And together, Michael, Christ, not the archangel we read about by the Catholics, Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah, he is Michael. He will now take his church out of the wilderness, from the dragon's clutches, and repositions her into the vineyard and protects her there from the forces of darkness. Never again will she have to deal with the economies of this world. She will certainly go out into the world in the last gospel herald. Fair as a moon, clear as a sun, and terrible as an army with banners, conquering and to conquer. In Daniel 2 verse 44 we're told, "And in the days of these kings, the two kings, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. But it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." This is the pre-Advent kingdom. This is the stone kingdom of Daniel 2. This is the place that God has preserved as a holding place for the saved. And he desires that we fix our minds on that other time. When Christ was here, the disciples asked him, "Lord, wilt thou this time restore the kingdom again unto Israel?" He said, "It's not for you to know." Now it's time, it is for us to know. And it is a present truth message for today. And we urge you to share these messages far and wide, that others may come taste and see that our God is good, and that he is a provision against the time of trouble that is ahead of us. Here, Ellen White, in closing, in Signs of the Times, December 27th, 1899, made this profound statement: "Your work, my work, will not cease with this life. For a little while we may rest in the grave, but when the call comes, we shall take up our work in the kingdom of God to advance the glory of Christ. This holy work must be begun upon earth." So those who die in faith of the third angel's message will awake from their dusty beds to take up their work once more. My brethren, God is calling us to be numbered among the earth's final evangelists. Let us strive with all the power he has given us to be one of or one with the 144,000 is my prayer, while we keep our minds focused on that other time. Loving Lord, we thank you for today and for this glorious time in which we find ourselves living. Father, we see the panoramic view of the signs of the times stretching out before us, written as though they were printed last night and published today. We pray you help us to make our calling and election sure as we fix our minds upon you. Keep us free from evil powers. Be our guide through these dark and dreary hours. Deliver us from evil, we pray, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. And we thank you and praise you, both now and always, in Emmanuel's name, Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
I have fixed my mind on another time, on another time. And here I mean to stand until God gives me more light. And that is today until He comes. I have fixed my mind on another time, on another time.